Coming up on Mount Hermeneutics, the Old Testament endorses ethnic cleansing and slavery. Or does it? I mean, we have a take, so keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
It's just a number. I mean, my doctor says I'm basically like 25. So
Is that what,
that's your psychiatrist?
Hopefully Tom Cruise doesn't come and kick my ass. That's what.
He's only this tall.
So Matt's wrong.
It 100%.
What's happening? What up?
I was kind of cringing at your I'm like, does it? Does it? Okay. All right. He turned it around. What's going on, guys?
I drove up to Ogden, Utah, because I had Hootie and the Blowfish concert tickets with Collective Soul. Both of them were doing their 30-year anniversary of whatever album that Shine was on, and of course Cracked Review. And
I feel like you should have invited us to that with you.
Yeah, we bought those tickets like a year ago.
That was kind of our time.
Yeah, and it was way better than I anticipated.
That's cool.
Hootie and the Blowfish is actually good.
Yeah,
and it was kind of really interesting how the dude, everybody in the band that wasn't the lead guitar, Darius, or the bassist, played all the other instruments.
Oh, really?
Depending on what song. Like someone would slide over and play the keys for a little while. They had the bongo set up, and then they did their little bluegrass session, which is, I guess, like the third or fourth album where they do some. Like, we want to be a bluegrass band, so here we go. And then they played some of Darius' country stuff, and then they did some covers of Zeppelin.
They played Wagon Wheel.
They did play Wagon Wheel, and like some people. First one.
A lot of people won't admit to this, but I will. I listened to Hootie and the Blowfish a lot back.
A lot of people did.
Yeah, it's like a top-selling album of all time. Like,
yeah,
it's like a number one.
Yeah,
like they could never do anything again. They'd be rich.
I never understood why they were like a guilty pleasure band, because the music was solid. It wasn't edgy. It wasn't hard.
I think
it was in that middle, right? It wasn't whatever edges of music. They're like dead in the middle of all of it, which makes everybody like it.
I think because they were played so much, that one song was just constantly playing. Like,
or the 3 or 4 off of Crack Review played.
Let Her Cry is my favorite.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
it's one of Darius' favorite.
Is it?
He likes Ty. That's what he told me. He told everyone.
Yeah, he told you.
So, yeah, he's old. But yeah, it was good.
I saw an interview with one of the lead singer for Collective Soul, and he said that he was screwing around when they recorded Shine, and he was literally yelling "yeah" through a toilet paper roll. Yeah. Yeah. He was yelling it through an empty toilet paper roll.
Hey, you get that sound. You get that sound, right?
I never listened to it the same way again.
They covered STP,
Stone Temple Pilots for
yes,
so for any of our Gen A listeners,
for the youngins,
and
for the kids at home.
What I didn't know, what Darius also told me, is that their entire inspiration was REM. So they covered them. It's like if it wasn't for REM, we wouldn't even know how we sound. So this goes out to them, and then
when they called that,
that's me in the corner, that's me in the spot. Like, so yeah, and then I came down and did Delani's father's 75th birthday.
Nice.
So that was cool. There was like
Hootie the Blowfish and Collective Soul played at your father-in-law's birthday.
Yeah, we'll go there. We'll do that.
We'll go with that.
I came down to St. George from Ogden, right there in Zion National Park, because it's the promised land. Also, home of the polygamists, which is fun. So I'm like, spot the pelig.
Because it sounded like you were saying they went down and played it.
Oh yeah, they totally did. But it was cool. It's like a little rock canyon resort for RVs and some little villas, and we rented out all of them. And there's a good 50, 60 people celebrating this old man, 4 generations worth of people.
Nice.
And that was pretty cool.
Jay's good people.
He
Shout out,
was
Jay.
he was
Happy birthday.
missing, I think he was missing 2 grandchildren of all of his. He's got 11 great grandchildren. 9 of them are from Dustin, and 2 of them are from a woman named Delaney that we all know.
I've heard of her.
But yeah, man, that was, and then of course we had the assassination attempts. That was pretty, compelling.
Yeah, everything else kind of like, I can't really think of what I was doing before that happened. It's all pretty fuzzy.
That was pretty wild.
It happened while I was at the pool hanging out with kids, and Cooper just chucking little tweens into the because they're like, "You got abs? I'll fight you," and he's like, "Shut up." a lot of boy crushes going on Cooper for that thing.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think nothing really big's. Well, actually, no, I can by the time this releases. So this coming Friday, I will be hosting an engagement party for my daughter.
Whoa!
Oh, yeah. Congrats!
Oh, yeah. News!
Way to go, Sam!
Yeah.
Okay.
So he came out. I was out in the gym working out one day, and he texted me. He's like, "Hey, can I come out and talk to you for a minute?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm out in the gym." And he comes out and he, did the whole, Matt, I love your daughter, think the world of her, blah, blah. I'd like to marry her. And it was we got to have a little conversation. It was fun.
Nice.
Yeah. So, we're excited. I mean, obviously, so they've talked about marriage, so this won't be like an actual surprise, but Alyssa's apparently been heavily leaning towards a destination wedding. So, because she's not going to do the traditional big wedding, she mentioned that she'd like to have a surprise engagement and then a little engagement dinner party thing. So we're going to do that here at the house on Friday. So
San Diego is the destination. So
I mean, it probably wouldn't be off the table. She's leaning towards like the mountains. She wants to like be on a ski slope or something like that kind of deal.
Okay.
So we'll see.
There's lots of that in California too.
True. But there's
and Utah, so lots of places that I'm involved
with. Angel Fire, New Mexico is like driving distance from here.
Oh, okay, nice.
Which might make it more doable from a logistics because the last thing we want to do is have somebody get caught in a snowstorm and not make it in or out or something. So anyway, so
very cool, man. Congratulations, Alyssa.
Yeah,
and Carrie.
And I'll have to make sure that I remember that I brought this up on the show, and if something happens in the we don't have a green light on Friday, I'll have to hold this episode back.
Yeah.
or just cut through
if she says no, it'll be awkward. So.
She won't say no. That's not going to happen. No,
nice.
They're good. They've
cool.
Yeah. For having been around all of the boys she's dated, this is the only one that I could tell was completely like smooth and the relationship worked. There's a running joke that I made with Carrie that Sam he's a bullfighter as a hobby. And I said that it took a guy that wasn't afraid of bulls to not be afraid of my daughter. So
like he's a legit bullfighter. That's not like a metaphor.
Not like a Spanish bullfighter, an American cowboy bullfighter. So they stand out there and they just he doesn't stab it with no.
Okay.
No, they dance with it in that they have a minute and they get points for flair and they just basically try to not die for 60 seconds while the bull's charging them.
That's kind of cool. That's like all of the bravery of bullfighting without the animal cruelty.
Yeah, it's like a modern version of it. And what it is, it stemmed from rodeo clowns.
Yeah.
So this is how guys learn to be rodeo clowns, is if you become good enough at this, then you get to go be a protection clown, which is the guys that save the bull riders from dying.
Which doesn't sound like a promotion. But I can understand.
You got to be good is the point, right?
Where you got to be good and you can pump the crowd up and you got
because a lot of it. Well, no. That's a different. That's the rodeo clown, right? So the bullfighters, it's all business. Yeah. But the difference is and Sam and I have talked a little bit about because like my dog training background with working dogs, you have to learn how to make the bull come at you and how to target the bull so that it comes to this side so then you can move. Because if you just stand there, you're like, I'm just going to run fast. The bull's going to see you turn. He's going to go with you. He's going to track you and you know, you'll get the horn. Yeah. So that's why you have to be good at this to then go do protection, because then you're able to make the bull see you instead of the guy that he just bucked off that he wants to stomp a hole in.
That is a very strange life choice.
But it's a hobby of his. He's an electrician by trade, so he has a real job, and this is his weekend fun that he does.
It's still kind of a life or death choice that he's making.
Yeah. No, I get it. I've made life or death choices myself.
Right.
I wouldn't do it, but
you just joined the Marines.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that the same thing? I guess there are similarities. Cats.
Yeah.
I like that you're making fun of me for my discretion and not being a bullfighter, and because I joined the Marine Corps. Because I'll take it.
Some guy could just send me off to die.
Yeah,
and I have to do it.
That's a good point. I'm
just going to go to this remote base in the middle of nowhere, and we're going to haze each other like Lord of the Flies. Right? Like that seems a lot more reasonable than what he's doing.
That was a good time.
When I was a young Marine and freshly married, we had this conversation like, I love you. I would die for you. She's like, Andre, you would die for anyone. You're a Marine. You have come up with something better. Like, you die for anybody in the country. Like, what are you talking about? Get the fuck out of here.
I saw a thing, speaking of that, I just went blank on the singer's name. The little short, I'd catch a grenade for you guy.
Bruno Mars.
Bruno Mars said he canceled concerts in the Ukraine and in Israel. And they were like, he in fact would not catch a grenade for you.
Well, not for you.
Right.
Well, for those people.
Yeah. Not for them.
Yeah.
Maybe he lay his head on a train or saw or whatever it is with the lyrics.
Speaking of catching grenades in Israel.
Speaking of Israel, yeah, exactly.
Israel.
What are we talking about?
Is God a moral monster?
Well, so this stemmed from a question, right? From a fan question.
A fan question. Well, a listener question.
Listener question. Well, listener fans.
Do we have fans? I don't know. Well, a fan is short for fanatic, and it implies, like, I don't want to presume too much. That's all. It's just
that's nice of you.
Yeah, I like to think of them as fans.
It's fair. It's our fans. That's why we do this.
I like to think of our fans. I like to think of our fans in a tuxedo T-shirt, because like they're serious, but they're here to party.
I like to think of them more as like our cult followers.
So you remember the question? Do we have it written down somewhere?
We should read it. We should
read it. Let's read it.
Yeah.
I was hoping one of you would have it handy to read. I heard an atheist say that they cannot accept God in the Bible because of the conquest of Canaan, putting to destruction, the quote unquote ethnic cleansing, as it were. My thought is that an atheist shouldn't care one way or another. I don't accept morals. I don't know that we need to read all of that, but however, it is a difficult question. I can see honest hangups with it. How would you wrestle with that or discuss with someone who isn't going to readily accept giants, Nephilim, the Watcher story? And this is in reference to the idea of Israel slaying the giants and ridding the earth of the final surviving Nephilim and their descendants, the Rephaim and the Anakim. But yeah, it's a pretty common objection by skeptics. So what do you guys think?
Well, do we isolate Canaan specifically? Because there's other instances of.
There's lots of moral stuff in the Old Testament. Off the top of my head, you got slavery. You've got Abraham lying about who his wife is. You've got Lot.
That's still a weird one.
Yeah. Well, you've got. I have explanation. I have some explanation.
I see a lot. I think a lot of those are separate issues.
I think so too.
I think that's a very specific question about God, like
ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, and I wouldn't. He put that in quotes, so that's not. Okay. I'm not attributing that.
Well, of course,
him,
yeah.
But that is a common objection. So I wouldn't put it as ethnic cleansing. I think that's kind of Well, how do we
Well,
break
no,
this?
that's you defending it, but the attackers of the Old Testament would call
Right.
it ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's inaccurate, and that's not I don't think that's a fair reading of it, because the point is not we need to rid the earth of this ethnicity. The point is there are inhabitants of the land. We should probably find a passage and just
So
read it directly to.
I've got a more simple take that doesn't require the pulling the verses up.
Okay.
So my response is actually kind of simple. Do you think this actually happened? Right. I'm not talking to you two. I'm talking about if I was having a conversation with a non-believer and they said to me, "Hey, Matt, I love all this stuff about, Jesus and all that, but here's my thing, man, I just can't get down with this stuff in the Old Testament." And I would say, "Do you think it actually happened or not?" And if they say yes, meaning they think the Bible was written accurately and all of these events occurred, right? And they occurred at the behest of, or at the divination of, or God had some, component involvement with it happening. Do you think that's true? And they say, yeah. I'm like, okay. And so you have some kind of your personal moral invented problem. And they say, yeah. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, my thing is if we've gotten past the point that God actually exists, whatever the reasons are around this aren't really for me I'm not here to be the arbiter of God's decision making. Like, that's not what we're here for. That's not what this existence is about. And that's not what our mission statement is from Jesus. He didn't say, go forth, spread the word, and try to make everybody decide if they think it's real and useful and moralistic or not. Like, no, that's not part of our thing. That's not what humans are here to do. We're not here to judge God or his decision making or his morals or lack thereof, if that's how you take it.
I kind of
My
sort of agree with you, but at the
my
same
point is
time,
either there's either a God or not, right?
right.
Either God exists or he doesn't. If God exists and the Bible is real, I don't give a shit what you think about what God did or didn't do. That's just my simple take on it. It's like, who are you?
I come from an angle that I don't think that that happened. I don't think that God said for that to happen. I think we've talked about this before, where how do we take the Bible literally or not, right? And I've heard it said that that no, you don't read the Bible literally. You read it literally. Literarily. That's the word I'm looking for. I mean, there's all kinds of different genres, right, in the Bible. So you have like your historical narrative, you got gospels, you got poems, you got apocalypse, you've got prophets. So if you're reading apocalyptic text, that's mostly symbolism until it gives you a reason that it's not, by talking about a certain people that went to a certain place. So you're like, okay, that's not symbolism, but these verses in the middle of Revelation, that's obviously symbolism. And when we start talking about attacking Canaan, it looks to me like they're kind of war texts. And if you read anything that's ancient Near East, war text speaks with a lot of hyperbole, right? So, for example, just the other day, or just yesterday in the All-Star game, Shohei Ohtani hit a 3-run home run. The first thing I put in the chat is he destroyed that ball.
He knocked the cover off of it.
He did not. He in fact did not destroy the ball. The ball just went 400 feet and it was a home run, right? The USA annihilated Serbia today. If someone took that out of context, you think we just went to war, right? So, in my mind, that when he says something like "leave nothing breathing," I don't think that's what actually happened.
I've heard that take before, and that sounds very Heiser-ish, right? Like, you have to put yourself in the mindset of a ancient Near Eastern person, and they would have heard them say, "Leave nobody breathe," and they would have said, "Kill all of the warriors, and when they surrender, don't kill everybody else." And right,
in the Marine Corps, we close with and destroy, right? That doesn't mean kill everybody. It means destroy the target.
Right.
That's what that means. It could involve killing everybody. Also, these cities we talk about in Canaan, like Jericho and the like, those are military strongholds with people with political power that live there. So the people live off in the hills. So as the Israelites come in and whoop their butt, they didn't just keep going into the hills and start just slaying boys and girls, right? And I know this because even in Joshua, after they say that they did all these things, they in fact did not kill everything
because there were
or
still
everybody,
people,
because
right?
there were still people there and they
Yep.
still had trouble with them for years after. Joshua does say that I obeyed Moses. Moses said, kill every last, like some Samuel Jackson, when you absolutely positively got to kill every mofo in the room, AK-47. Right? So, but he said, I obeyed Moses, yet the people were still alive. So what's hyperbole war text and what was the meaning of why they were doing
it. So, your turn, Brian.
Yeah, I'm trying like that. I'm trying to think of how to approach this. To Matt, to your position, I mean, just putting myself in the position of an atheist, I think what's behind the question is just like for the sake of argument, they're presupposing that okay, this is true from your perspective, and you worship a God who would command such a thing. Therefore, it's not true because no God worthy of worship would command evil. Therefore, it's not true. So I don't like. I'm not. I don't think that your response really addresses that.
It doesn't. No, I
which is why he
agree.
said I don't care.
And that was my point is I'm like, look, either like the other stuff, like, and I'm coming at it from like, I'm having this conversation and we're talking about, did Jesus rise from the dead? Was Jesus a real
Right.
person? All that. And if we've gone through all of this, we validated that this person now buys off on the concept of Christ being the Son of God, dying, rising again, must be God, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so now we've already decided there's a God now, right? Yeah, we're definitely a God. Okay, and this is the God of this Bible, right? Yeah. And then God told these people to kill everybody in Canaan. Yeah, but I'm not buying that. I don't care. Like we're already past the point of do we accept that this divine entity exists and he is holy?
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I actually agree with you from an intellectual standpoint that like if we've already established that God did this, that God commanded this, that's his prerogative. Like he is, he is the arbiter of morality. But I know. I just remember when I was a brand new Christian, I had committed my life to Jesus Christ. I had been baptized, and I was reading through the Bible for the first time, and I came across those passages, and I was deeply disturbed by them. Like I couldn't reconcile that with the God who I had committed my life to, and I had to stop reading, and I prayed, and I asked, God, I don't understand how this could be you. I don't understand how this is something that would originate, a command that would originate with you, or that you would tell people to do this. Please help me to understand this. Because I don't get it. And I was disturbed for a while. And so I understand from the emotional response to it. And I don't think it's as, I think it takes a bit more work to get to where the intellectual acknowledgement of God's prerogative in doing that should get. It's one thing to acknowledge that intellectually. It's another thing to personally trust the God who commanded that. So like I don't take that objection. I don't take that objection lightly, at least when it's made in good faith. Often it's not made in good faith, but I think I don't think it's that easy. And Dre, I think that there is a lot of evidence that what you're saying is true, that it's hyperbolic language. But I don't know that it's conclusive evidence. And you do find that kind of wording in ancient Near Eastern literature of, put them to sword and leave nothing breathing alive. It is kind of the same thing as in a sports ball coach would say, go out and annihilate them and go out and
decimate them.
Right.
So kill every 10 of them, every 10th person I gotta kill. Okay.
And in one of the clues for that is in 1 Samuel, you have King Saul being commanded to go and annihilate the Amalekites, kill every last one of them, men, women, and children, even their flocks and herds. There are kind of indicators on both sides that, on the one hand, that it was literal and it meant every single person. On the other hand, that it was hyperbolic. Like, the text reads that Saul killed everyone other than Agag, king of the Amalekites, whom he kept alive for political reasons, and he let his men take of their flocks and herds for plunder. So Samuel shows up, but he immediately, God sends him to confront Saul. What's all this bleating of sheep that I hear? Weren't you told to kill everything? And Saul, well, I did obey. I just, the men, they needed plunder. I wanted the men to have plunder so they would, be motivated to fight. And why is King Agag still alive? So the fact that he didn't kill their flocks and herds, and Samuel called him to account for that, would, on the one hand, imply, no, it was literal. God meant every single one of them. But on the other hand, it says he spared only King Agag of the Amalekite people. Samuel killed King Agag, but then a few chapters later, Amalekites keep popping up to menace them. Mm-hmm. So obviously, he didn't kill all of them. So yeah, I think that there's merit to that argument, but I don't know that that settles it, because he still commanded them to go in and basically, drive out all the people. It's still an ugly thing that should still it should still grate against our modern sensibilities. But the thing that, so, I mean, I think your objection, Dre, it might mitigate it a bit, but I don't know that it totally deals with it. And I think that there are deeper issues that we kind of need to.
I think, I mean, first of all, the Israelites were a unique circumstance in of themselves, right? So they, God's chosen people, and they were given commandments, and they had their own covenant that wasn't given to everyone else. That wasn't the law of all the nations. And it's interesting that every time God judges someone other than Israelites, it's because they do something so heinous that they need to be judged for it. I mean, we're talking about things like sacrificing children, whipping open wombs to spread your lands, adultery, bestiality, like all these things that you don't want that government, that ruling, that those people. He just judges them, right? It wasn't like he's like, oh, they're just being peaceful neighbors over there, and because they're not Israelites, they're cleanse them.
Mostly peaceful.
Yeah, right. But no, these people, like, he gave them chances, and I mean, what Abraham even pleaded for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. If there's 50 men, can we spare it? And he's like, yeah. Then he started negotiating, like, about 40. How about 10?
I love that passage.
He's like, he gave me 50. What do you
think? It's kind of hilarious, but it's also like, you kind of see why God loves Abraham,
right?
And you kind of see, like, that, God doesn't want to do this, but it's kind of gotta.
Right.
But yeah, so I didn't interrupt you. I was just,
no, it's okay. I probably needed some interrupting, but in my mind, the laws that are given to them are not supposed to be the whole law for all time and eternity. It's
right.
It's given at a specific time. Now, are there things that are universal? I mean, I think Genesis kind of points those out, right? The man and the woman, and marriage, and being fruitful. You're commanded to do those things. But then when you start getting specific laws, also, I think you said something, to drive out. And to drive out, I think, is specific language because we start talking about the nations and other gods, and their soil meant that was like the rule of that land. So you have to separate the people from the land. That was a way to get them to stop worshiping that god, or if they do, they can't do it. You can worship your god, but you can't do it here. So I, I think that the driving out was kind of more of the explicit language
Yeah.
than to murder them all.
Well, there was definitely some linkage between gods and geography.
Correct. Yeah,
right?
that's what you said that very much better than me.
Yeah, because it goes going back to when the Ethiopian, asked to take some of the dirt back so that he could worship Yahweh.
Naaman the Syrian is the specific
Syrian. Okay, whatever. Yeah, but that story, right? Like that to me just really locks that in, that they going back to the story of Babel, right? And spreading humanity and giving them over to the sons of God. Like, I mean, that's really what it was. He was like, all right, everybody, you take grid square 12, you take grid 6, right? Like I'm Yahweh actual, I'm Yahweh actual, and I'm taking all these back over here to
there's indication, and like it doesn't, I'm not dogmatic on this, but there are clues that land was Yahweh's land. And like, because when Melchizedek rescues Lot from the five kings, he pays tribute to when Abraham rescues
Who did you
Lot,
say? Who?
I said Melchizedek at first. I meant to say when Abraham rescued Lot from the five kings, and then he went.
I was like, you gotta say that guy's name backwards, and he disappears.
He went and he paid tribute to Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who was the priest of El Elyon, or God Most High, and so he was.
Melchizedek priesthood.
Yeah,
El Elyon is the unpersonal name of Yahweh.
Well, no, Yahweh is the personal name.
That's what I said. I said the unpersonal name.
Right. Sorry, I misheard you.
Yeah.
You are correct.
I might have said it clumsily.
Yeah. But yeah, El Elyon is typically translated as God Most High.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Abraham paid tribute to Melchizedek, who was king of Salem and priest of El Elyon, indicates that El Elyon is in fact Yahweh, and that God had a sort of chosen people there already, but that they had apostatized, much as we read about Israel apostatizing, and God was giving them chances. And when they totally apostatized and went to the extent of sin that we read about, that's when God said, well, they've had their chance, I'm going to drive them out. But to deal with the more fundamental issue, for the modern, the modern reader who objects to it because it conflicts with their modern sensibilities, the answer I usually give is that, and just for illustration purposes, if somebody comes into my house and carries off my property to their house, or to a warehouse, or to a fence, or a pawn shop, or something, well, that's theft, right? Like as a society, we've agreed that's a serious crime called stealing, and they're gonna maybe do decades of time in jail for that, right?
Not in California.
Right. As a society, we've agreed, excluding California.
In Canada.
And every city across the nation.
There was a news release where some in one of the larger cities in Canada, I think it's in Toronto, there apparently were a lot of people breaking into homes to steal the key fobs for the cars. And he was recommending that people leave the key fobs by the front door.
Oh, right, yeah, I saw that.
That's what I was making reference to. Sorry.
Gotcha. It's okay. But if I take my property out of my house and take it to another location, say I'm moving, or say I'm
right,
or say I'm giving it away, that's not stealing. That's
because it's yours and you can do whatever you want with it.
Right. nobody in their right mind would say, well, that's not, but like ontologically and objectively, I'm doing the same actions as the thief is doing, but it's not stealing. Nobody in their right mind would say, well, hey, that's not fair. That's a double standard. How come you get to do that, but that other person doesn't? This seems like a dumb illustration because we all understand that stealing is wrong and that it's impossible to steal from yourself. But the difference between what I'm doing, what that person is doing, it all boils down to this abstract concept known as property rights. Like we have this understanding of property rights in our culture, that according to which one person doing the same thing that I was doing is theft, and he's going to be put in a cage for decades, whereas I'm doing it, it's innocent and not even remarkable. But we can all conceive of a society. In fact, we don't have to imagine, there are such societies that don't have that concept of property rights. They have ideas of collective ownership of property, so that one person going and helping themselves to property to an item in somebody else's home, it wouldn't be remarkable. And in fact, in a lot of our political discussions, we kind of abolish the idea of property rights with regard to the means of production. There are people who think if someone is too rich, that's an injustice, and the government should come in and redistribute their wealth. So it's not hard to imagine this abstract concept of property rights kind of being done away with, so that what's a clear-cut moral infraction to our sensibilities, that being theft, wouldn't necessarily be under their scheme of things. First off, like, the point of all that is that just as like it's impossible for me to steal against myself, it's impossible for God to commit murder. It's impossible for God to commit injustice, because all life is his. And it's as I was kind of doing a little bit of research for this podcast, I was curious about what did the early church fathers have to say about the conquest of Canaan. What did Christianity's early critics have to say about it? And it turns out there's like, maybe to my best knowledge, there is absolutely nobody in the world who had any ethical objection to the conquest of Canaan until like post-Enlightenment.
They didn't have a problem with conquest of anything or anybody, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So two quick things. I like where you're going, Brian. I mean, two thoughts. One, your point of stealing your own stuff kind of makes sense. I think a better analogy might be when you were a kid and you were out with your buddies and you were mad at your mom, and you're like, man, my mom's, whatever. And then your buddy's like, right, your mom's up. And you hit him before the words get out of their mouth, right? It's like, don't ever talk about my mom, right? It's my mom. I can say things about my mom, which you shouldn't, right? But it happens when you're a kid. But like that's a normal, every boy's been through that kind of experience, right?
Mom, if you're watching, I never did that.
Or your other brother, right? Or you're like, maybe you smack your brother up a little bit, right? Then your buddy's like, yeah, let's whip up with your brother. You're like, why'd you touch my brother? Now I have to kill you, right?
Or like the moron Marines as we go to the club and the army wants to beat them up.
Yeah, like Swearingen has to act a fool.
I literally just kicked that dude's ass yesterday, but
now we got to get in a fight and defend Swearingen.
I wasn't going to name names.
Beat him up.
I was not going to name names, but that is exactly what came to mind.
I wasn't going to name names either, but I thought maybe one of you would, and I found it amusing.
But so that's my first thought.
It was always that guy.
To go with your first point, Brian, but then that last thing you said about it being, life is God's and he can take it. There's a word that jumps to mind, right? That I use it. I try to use it clinically or correctly. And the word is righteousness, right? Like the term gets used in modern language when you do something that you were supposed to do, or you do something, but you hear about it, police movies, right? The cop will kill somebody and they'll say, hey, that was a righteous shoot. right? And what they're
Right.
saying is you're not going to get in trouble for that one, man. Everything was lined up the way it should have for you to do something that the average person shouldn't do. But
Yeah.
because you're a cop, you had to do that thing and it was righteous. And I think that's using biblical language, I think it's really important to remember the point that you just made, right? If God does something, it's always righteous.
Yeah.
Because it's his to do, right? It's his, this is his, he has dominion over everything. So I think you just said a very, very more correct, maybe better constructed, maybe more articulate version of the same thing that I said. I think it's really, without trying to justify what I opened the show, this conversation with, it's like, so what? Like, who are you? Who are you to judge what God does? What he does is righteous.
Can you explain the analogy that about like, I can beat up my brother, but you can't? Like, how does that?
What do you mean?
That's the okay.
I was using that as a more direct analogy to taking your own stuff versus someone taking your stuff, right? If you hit your brother, it's just you and your brother, right? It's like, especially if it's your little brother, it's like, come on, like this is, my parents made this kid for me to punch on. Like, that's like why he exists for now.
Right. But that's kind of part of like that's the setup for my point. That's a component of it. But my main point is that the fact that we have that objection today, in the ancient world, like that, like if somebody made that objection, if you made that objection to a pagan Roman, to say nothing of a Jew or a Christian, he'd look at you like you had two heads. Like he'd be like, well, like why would that be wrong?
Right.
But the fact that we have these one, it points out that our moral sensibilities are totally different than what they were at the time. Mm-hmm. Just like, we have this concept of property rights, whereas that defines our moral parameters in our society. We can easily envision a society with a different moral framework where that wouldn't necessarily be considered wrong. I think it would still be objectively wrong, and that society is wrong who doesn't deem it so. But the fact of the matter is there is difference, and there are those kind of cultural differences that raise these objections, and which raises the question of, well, where did we get our moral sensibilities by which we find that so objectionable? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, spoiler alert, we got it from the Bible.
It's interesting you went down this line, because I think I keep thinking about our moral sensibilities, and you've said this several times throughout our year of podcasting this show.
Subtle plug.
Is that the Israelites were way ahead of their time when it came to morals in the first place. So a lot of people will object to the Old Testament having slaves and there's lying, but in the Old Testament, it's the first time where you start hearing about slave rights, right? Like, you start talking about, hey, if you beat your slave, you have to let them go free. That's the rules, right? So you had to treat them because they had rights as people.
If you rape a woman, you have to marry her,
right? Every time we think about,
there's a lot of that stuff.
Every time we think about slavery, we think about antebellum United States, right? Where that's property, and I get to beat them, and I get to do whatever I want. Well, that's how it was in the rest of the world. But it was God's people and the Bible that actually say, hey, you can't do that. And when we start talking about an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, like, yes, it could be literal, but it meant compensation. Where if you hurt someone or you took someone's property, like, you had to owe them back something of equal value.
And it's ironic to me that people cite eye for an eye as testament to the Bible, the barbarity of the Bible. No, that was to place limits on it.
Right.
Like, typically, if I lose an eye to you, I'm going to kill your whole family now.
Right. Like, no, just take his eye.
What the Torah was saying is, no, you just get knife. He owes you an eye. That's all he owes you.
Right.
Right.
And also, it's worth pointing out that when you take all of the laws about slavery in the Torah and just kind of aggregate them, what you get is a formula to end slavery. And
Yes.
what I mean is, first off, it says that if anyone kidnaps a fellow Israelite to sell him into slavery, well, you get the death penalty. That's just not going to happen. If you want to buy slaves, you're not going to have slave markets in Israel. You got to go to another nation. You got to go to a surrounding nation, buy your slaves there, and then bring them back. And when you bring them back, then
or what about escaped slaves? So anyone that escapes slavery,
they come into. I'm getting to that. I'm building to that. I'm building to that. But a lot of people will object because there's a passage that says, for your Hebrew slave, he serves you for 6 years, but in the 7th year, you have to free him unless he wants to stay with you. And then you can put a like a thing in his ear to signify that he belongs to your household, and he swears an oath to you and you swear an oath to him. If he doesn't want to stay, you have to give him like a generous severance package so he can go set up somewhere else. But if he does want to stay because he's got it so good there, well, then you need to let him. And there's the things you do. People object to say, well, that just applies to Hebrew slaves, to Israelite slaves. It doesn't apply to the slaves they go get from other nations. When it says Hebrew slave, it doesn't mean Israelite. Hebrew, the word Hebrew comes from Abraham's ancestor Eber. Like all the surrounding people are considered Hebrews. All Israelites are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Israelites. The assumption is that if they have a slave, it's from a foreign nation. So when it says Hebrew slaves, it doesn't mean Israelite. It's specifically saying that to distinguish from an Israelite slave. Because an Israelite slave, it says don't treat him like a slave. Don't treat him like a hired hand, like he's a free man who's working for you. Do not treat him as you would a slave. So when it talks about freeing a Hebrew slave, it doesn't mean an Israelite. It means a foreigner. And then, as Dre mentioned, there's also a law that says that says that if I was confusing that with the cities of refuge, but that's not actually. It says if a slave flees to your city from his master, don't give him over to his master. So basically, it basically renders all slavery voluntary, and the cumulative impact of all of their slavery laws is what you get from that is that the institution of slavery in Israel existed for the sake of the slave. It was a social safety net so that they're not homeless and living in a gutter. What you could, if you're impoverished, you can sell yourself into slavery where you have rights. There is that one passage that talks about if you beat your slave, and he loses an eye or a tooth, then you're to free him and give him money and a generous severance package. Or if you beat him and he's in bed for a couple of days, but then gets back up, he's fine. But if he's crippled, then you have to basically compensate him. And it says, for he is your property. And people always object to that and take that as dehumanizing.
You're supposed to cultivate and take care of
it's a responsibility thing.
Things that are yours, you need to take care of.
It means the presumption is your financial interest is not in killing your slave. It's right. It's like that's like going out and taking a crowbar to your own car. But
I heard somebody else make a point that, I mean, we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but they said, look, slaves are talked about in the Bible because it was an issue of the time. But you'll notice that nowhere in the Bible does it say you should take slaves or I order you to have slaves. Like, it was more like, I mean, if you're going to have slaves, here's what you got to do, right? And then to the points that you guys made, it was all a controlling, sliding the Overton window up this way, right? So it's like, hey, I get it. You're going to have slaves because you're all primitive idiots right now. And you're going to get past this. But for now, you're going to have slaves. And while you have slaves, this is how you have to handle them, right?
I mean, it was the same with like divorce.
Right.
That was like another, like,
right.
Okay, we're not supposed to divorce, but since you idiots do it,
yep.
here's how you're going to do it so we can abolish it later.
Right.
Yeah, they asked Jesus about divorce, and is it right for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? And he said, no. If you divorce your wife, you cause her to commit adultery, and then who marries the divorced woman commits adultery.
Yeah.
But it was not so from the beginning. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So then they asked him, well, then why then did Moses command us to write our wives a certificate of divorce? Moses permitted you to divorce your wives,
Right.
because your hearts were hard.
Right.
But it was not so from the beginning.
Basically, he's like, I don't want you to, but if you're gonna,
right,
here's how you're gonna do it. Yeah.
Which establishes a broader principle that the law is in the law of Moses, God is making concessions to the fact that we're sinful. He's not endorsing the sin. It says elsewhere that he hates divorce.
Right.
But
It's almost like the Bible was the first set of humanitarian rights that were codified in something that was bigger than, regional law.
All the things that go on in the Old Testament, there's some of the lying and the cheating, and then you got like a lot of righteous people doing bad stuff. But just because something is described in the Bible, it doesn't mean that it's prescribed or that it ought to happen, right?
Yep.
It's just describing the things that happen. David did these things, and
David did a lot of things.
Right. Moses did these things. Abraham lied about his wife. God didn't tell him to do that. He didn't make him do that. He was covering his own ass because he saw what happened to people because his wife was so hot.
Apparently, she was a smoke show.
Smoke show. Like, I'm gonna get smoked with my sister. So, but yeah.
By the way, he really wasn't lying.
Yuck.
They were related.
I'm not sure that do we want to divert to this? Because I'm not.
I'll look it up and we can talk about it after post show. But no, when the king calls him on it, he was like, "Why did you say she was your sister and not your wife?" And he was like, "Well, she is technically my sister also, but I am married to her."
Right. He could have still been lying though, because
he lied about her not being his wife. Is my point. I was making a joke about it. It was like a half lie.
Right, but when he was confronted afterwards and he says she really is my sister, he might have still been like trying to kind of mitigate it, but in lying, because when he's introduced, he's Abraham, the son of Terah, I think, and then his wife Sarai. It doesn't say his Sarai, daughter of Terah. I mean, there's nothing other than that to indicate that Sarah was his wife. It's just
Genesis 20:12. She is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. So she became my wife.
Yeah, I mean that's from Abraham, who had just lied before, and he might have still been lying. He might not have felt totally safe just yet. So he was just kind of trying to take the edge off the fact that he lied about the one thing. And so I don't know if that's conclusive, but we can agree to disagree on that.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm taking my man at face value.
So, but yeah, not everything that is described is being prescribed, to Dre's point.
I know a big objection that people have is the episode with Isaac and to be sacrificed, and the angel of the Lord's like, okay, you don't have to do that because I know that you fear God. It's interesting leading up to that too, because when Abraham is taking his son and his servants up to go worship, he knows he was made a promise that Isaac was going to be that seed. So it's interesting to me that even though he's going to do this sacrifice, for some reason he just knows Isaac's going to be okay because there's no way God's breaking this promise. So I can go ahead and do this thing. I don't think I think that even if he killed him, then maybe he was going to be ascended at that moment, or it was going to be a good thing that he died, right? They make it sound like God tricked him and was testing him, and like, what kind of a God tests somebody on this level, and why?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it brings us back to the I think our initial point that it's God's prerogative to do what God does. And I think that deserves to be reiterated. Again, nobody prior to the Enlightenment even thought of objecting to any of this on ethical grounds, because it was just understood that, God, it isn't just that God has the right to condemn the guilty. God could kill the righteous. All life is his. He doesn't have to justify himself. It isn't murder any more than I can steal from myself. And this was
this is just to amplify what you're saying. Depending on how reformed your Christianity is, you could argue that he does take all of the life because he decides when and where we die. I mean,
and he's already decreed
I'm being serious.
Die.
Like, I'm not trying to be funny about it, right? Like, I mean, yeah, he said our day won't be longer than 120 years, right? And if you believe that he has a direct hand in everything, and this is all predestined, then God is killing us at every single turn. Every time somebody dies, that's God's hand turning the lights out.
Well,
so if you're reformed, like you're God's a mass murderer if you're inclined to look at it that way.
Well, he's a mass murderer in the same sense that I'm a thief.
Right.
If I move.
Again, going back to he's righteous and he can do what he wants. But I'm just saying, like, if you keep what ifing this all the way up the tree, right?
Right. But I do think, I mean, when people read that and the objection is, well, how is that different than what Muslims do? How is that different than Muhammad conquering the Arabian Peninsula and making people convert at the edge of sword point, or Muslims, or the entire Islamic imperial expansion that happened up until when did it stop? I mean, 20th century with the Ottomans, I guess, but I mean, Christians historically object to that. And so people, I think it's, to a degree, it's a legitimate question. What makes the Israelites in the Old Testament different from Muslims?
Righteousness. That's what makes them different. Because
explain how so.
Muhammad was not a prophet of God. So what he did was not under orders from Yahweh, so it could not be considered righteous. Well, like, to me, it's a very binary conversation. Like, this is where, again, if you play the if then, right? That's the difference.
What if God? Well, I don't want to. I don't disagree with you. I don't know.
You don't like how simplistic I'm making it because it doesn't lend itself to the conversation. I mean,
well, no, like
it doesn't answer the objection.
Well, let me put it this way. Let me tell you my train of thought here. If God told Muhammad, you know what, I reject the Israelites and the Christians, and the Muslims are my chosen people now. You're the best. Muslims are the best people, and this is actually in the Quran. Muslims are the best of Allah's creations. The
very best.
I was going to say, people. We don't say it; they say it.
I didn't say it. God told me.
You can ask anyone. People often do. But the Quran says that the Muslims are the greatest, the best of Allah's creations, and the Jews and the polytheists. Polytheists is what he was calling Christians by that point, because he considered the Trinity to be right. They're the worst of people. Therefore, make war upon them, fight them until they fight those who disbelieve in Allah on the last day, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's the justification for jihad. I would say that if God told him that, that's still God's prerogative, and they would be right if he did.
Capital I, capital F.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah. But how we know he didn't do that the reason that one of the many reasons we know that God did not tell Muhammad that he made that up is that, first of all, as we've discussed, that ground has already been covered. God already told the Israelites to go and conquer a land, but what he told them was vastly different than what Muhammad claims Allah told him, or Gabriel told Allah, told him on Allah's behalf. I think it's an important point to distinguish that Muhammad never claimed to hear from Allah. He claimed to hear from Gabriel on behalf of Muhammad. There's an apologetics argument there for why that matters. I don't want to get too much into it, but we'll just say Allah told him that from now for argument's sake. Now, sorry to go off on a tangent.
The transitive property of Allah.
Sure. But what we read when God told Moses and Joshua and the Israelites that, it was, this is not because you're better than them. Don't think that this is because you're more righteous than they are, because you're a stiff-necked, stubborn people. I'm giving you the land because I promised it on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because I set my love on them, and because the Canaanites they've sinned to full measure. Like, this is my judgment against them, but don't be arrogant about this, because if you break my covenant, I'm going to do the same to you. And he did. He sent the
Babylonians.
He sent the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Egyptians, the Philistines. He kept sending invaders to do to them what he had to the Israelites,
right?
And ultimately the Romans. But so the point was not you're the better people, and so you get to take it. It's your prerogative to kill everyone who isn't you until they submit to you and your conquest. It's you're the instrument of my punishment, and it's for this land. We're giving you this land. Don't take the land from the Edomites or the Moabites. I gave that to them. Yeah, they got their own issues. That's not your problem. You take your land. And he told them things like, don't help yourself to their flocks and herds and their servants and their goods. Destroy it all, because he didn't want plunder to be a motivation. He didn't want them to think that because they're God's chosen people, they get to just take what they want.
So you tell me God hates pirates?
Not necessarily, but he just doesn't want to encourage it. I think that's the point.
Look at me. This is my shutdown.
So there's that, but there's also the fact that there's the new covenant. That the old covenant was God gave his chosen people a land and a law to follow, and keeping that land was conditional upon keeping that law. And law is a matter of, as with any government, as with any law, it's a matter of, frankly, violent coercion. You don't obey laws because you agree with them. You obey laws because you get people with guns and badges come and put you in a cage if you don't, and if you resist them, they kill you. So it's essentially, like, all law is essentially death. Death or obedience. Death ultimately.
Yeah.
Right. But the new covenant, salvation by grace through faith, you obey because you believe it. Even if the law is against you, even if the governing authorities say, renounce your God, or we're going to nail you to a cross, or burn you with a stake, or feed you to lions, you do it anyway, because you do it because you believe it's a reward for its own sake, and departing from it is its own punishment. And you see this, there's nuances that I'm skipping over here, but you see this whole progression from the Torah through Judges, through the choosing of a king, to their kings being apostate and variously apostate and faithful, then exile, and then coming back and kind of spending a couple hundred years looking back on their history and awaiting the Messiah. And then when the Messiah comes, he kind of ties it all. He kind of, puts a bow on it all and explains it all and puts it all into perspective. And it's all sort of consummated in the new covenant, which is one of salvation by grace through faith. You persuade people to join God's kingdom, and you're transformed from the inside out. And 600 years later, this guy shows up and claims, no, we're the new chosen people. And he's got this very ham-fisted, clumsy, caricatured version of the Old Testament, which is just a return to the same, not even the same. It's basically every cliche that you would think from. It's like every cliche that a hostile skeptic would think about the Old Testament or the Bible as a whole, but turned into a religion.
Yeah.
And so, like, anybody who knows the narrative of the Bible, who hears Muhammad offering this, this version that supposedly supersedes the Bible, it's obviously false. And so you know that the God who led Israel and sent Jesus Christ would not command these things. He wouldn't give this open-ended command for his people to conquer the entire world because they are intrinsically better than everybody else, because they have this law. All of that stuff has been tried, and you kind of, it's just seeing the real thing. You recognize counterfeit is the bottom line. And there are, I think there are key principles that define the real thing and exclude the counterfeit, as we've discussed. And I'm not sure if that was a pithy enough, tidy objection to settle it, but hopefully you get a sense of
the pith was noted. I don't think it was lost on the listeners.
Thanks. I just wish I had like a clever slogan I could give you to just here's the objection, and boom, mic drop.
I think, I don't want to oversimplify it again, right? Like, but I think
no, do it. I overcomplicated it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we kind of each gave our take, right? And I think it's a combination of, Dre said, are we sure that's even really what happened? Because, language was different. You got to kind of think how they think. And in fairness, a lot of the Arab world still speaks in those kinds of, we'll call them flourishes, right? Like, but yeah, that hyperbolic language is still very common. Like,
the exaggeration.
The rivers will run red with the blood of the Americans. It's like, really? Like, probably not, but okay. Like, I like the
enthusiasm.
I like the cut of your jib. Right. So like, that's, Dre made that point, and I think there's I think we can all agree there's definitely some validity to that. It could be the whole answer, could be part of the answer, right? Brian, then you made the point that I kind of simplified and said, so what if he did? Like, it was his to do. This is all his. God stands in, righteous land. He's in rarefied space, and he's the only one that can be the sole arbiter of what is moralistically right and wrong. Yeah.
I want to circle back to that.
And then I came back around and I said, then I came back over the top of all that, and I was like, who the hell are you to have an opinion about this? You shut your mouth. Say Christ is Lord. Right? Like, that was kind of our the collective view of us on this topic.
Yeah. It just on that point, I think I just kind of the point that I was trying to bring out was that while I understand the objection, because I too am a product of the 21st century. I 100% understand all the moral sensibilities that we bring to that, but at the same time, you're sawing off the very branch that you're sitting on in two very pronounced ways by that objection to Christianity. One, as we've discussed, God can't commit murder any more than I can steal my own stuff. It's a logical impossibility. It's like creating a square circle or a married bachelor. God is the arbiter and source of morality. But I understand but the fact that we don't like, we don't intuitively understand that as a culture. Like, I think that itself, that's something to be addressed. That's something that we need to kind of take stock of, by noticing the fact that first, as just one component of this reckoning, prior to the Enlightenment, none of Christianity's critics objected to that. Just, it didn't, like, it was intuitively understood that yes, God has that prerogative to take life, just as it is his prerogative to give life. But the fact that we, one, how did we get these moral sensibilities we have, by which we find that so objectionable? How did we change so much since the time when Christianity came about? And nobody would have thought to make that. Well, it's because of the Bible. It's because of the very thing you're criticizing. You didn't get it directly from the Bible. You got it from TV and from school and from pop culture and all the other things. But it, that came to you by way of, those were the delivery methods, but they got that from the Bible. All these ideas about human rights, and this is all from the Bible. And if people don't know that, if they don't understand that, they just don't understand history. They don't know the world they live in. And that's, but I don't think that's something that's unique to atheists. I think Christians alike, we kind of have there's a pronounced lack of the fear of God in our culture, and I would also argue in our churches. Like, it gets honorable mention, the fear of God, but we don't really. I'm not sure we really have it the way we used to. Like, people.
Andrew Tate agrees with you.
Well,
he's like, damn it, I don't want to agree with that guy.
Brian's like, I retract what I said. Wait, but I can't.
I don't.
It was correct.
I don't. But what they say about broken clocks and all that. But
there's something I want to push back, and I'm not sure what part that I'm pushing back. I think the whole God's prerogative to kill, okay, but God's not hypocritical, right? So
let me see if I can word this the way what I think you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong. Because
there has to be a reason. It has to be justified. So he didn't just kill because that's what he wants to do, right?
Yeah, he didn't do it for fun. Like, if we're getting from the Bible that human life is sacred, then how can we believe that this is of God when God himself apparently doesn't hold that value? I think is what you're.
100%.
Yeah.
So I think by just flippantly saying because God wanted to and because it's his rules.
Not he wanted to. I think that's if I might have said that in my simplification. So if I said that, I misspoke.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's just what I got, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
And even though I know that's not where you're coming from, I think to answer this is because they deserved it, right? They went there, and I truly believe in my heart that they were combatants that were killed. They were combatants, and they're political leaders, or there were people who didn't leave, and they got a warning: you have to be driven out of this land. So anybody that stood and fought, they died on that land, just like you would do with your house, no matter how you got it. If somebody came to you and said, "Hey, if you don't leave your house, you're going to die, and this is the hill you're going to die on," then you die on that hill. Does that make those other people wrong? Maybe.
Well, Brian,
but it depends on why they're doing it.
Brian thinks it was justified to drop a couple of atom bombs on Japan.
He does,
right? But
yes.
This is in some of that same kind of thought
process.
I
do think ethical.
Yeah.
But I think that's an interesting. That's also like
God didn't just choose to just kill. Like, hey, they had a choice, because we talk about free will many times too, and free will also is to die. Free will is to do the thing.
Free will is to misbehave, to sin, to commit crimes, to justify your own death.
To justify your own death. So,
right. And so I think, Dre, the way I would respond to, and I know you're kind of pushing back philosophically, not necessarily directly, but you're trying to get the point fleshed out.
No, I think
the way I would look at it is God does see our life as sacred, or, you know, as an important thing, but God sees submission to his law as higher than our life, because he is holy. Right. He's like, look, I love you guys. I care about your lives. I made you all. Like I spoke you into existence, and you're the most important things.
But to be fair, God did not give the Canaanites the law.
Well,
he gave all of man the law.
He did not.
I sort of think
he did not.
He did.
What do you mean? What do you mean he didn't?
The Mosaic.
You got to go back.
Right? He didn't give them that exact law, but as that, and again, well, I want to concede I want to concede your argument for this. I want to concede your point for the sake of argument. I just want to note that there are indications that the people of Canaan were a sort of chosen people before Israel because of Melchizedek, because he had the priest of God Most High.
But they were taken over by other gods.
But they apostatized to those other gods. But I just wanted to note that. But
if you want to punish generations down the line for apostasy,
I don't think it was about punishment, though. Right? It was about reclaiming the land.
I think it was about,
and that's my point. So the judgment, they stood on that hill and died.
Yeah.
I don't think the townspeople or the villagers or the hardworking people of Canaan just got slaughtered by Joshua and his people.
So this isn't like the contractors that were on the Death Star.
Like, hey,
like I said before,
and you're good.
Like I kind of agree and disagree with you both, and I don't say this I'm trying to clarify. I think we're kind of back where we started, but I think maybe we're arguing, we're kind of clarifying our points a little more.
That's all this is. Like, I think we're within spitting distance at this point.
Like I can agree with Dre and that, like Matt, I agree with what you said intellectually. Like it's God's prerogative. He can do whatever he wants. That's 100% true and intellectually valid.
But what kind of example is that?
But it doesn't address the emotional objection, and it is valid. Kind of from what Dre is saying is that if God if God is trying to convey these values, the values of human life to humanity, then why wouldn't he himself uphold those values? Why wouldn't he command Israel in a way that honored those values? Why would he have them wipe out entire,
so I think he showed tons of restraint in all kinds of matters.
So my simple response to what you just said, Brian, and I don't want to nitpick your words, but you said something that I want to address.
Right.
God's word, his kingdom, and his righteousness doesn't give a shit about your feelings and your emotions. It should be the other way around. That's the problem. And you said this a minute ago in your earlier point.
It should be, but I think he does.
I don't think so.
I think he does too.
He wants our faith. He wants our faith.
He wants our love. He wants our obedience.
We're justified by
love.
We're justified by faith.
Faith is what gives us. But he doesn't want our faith. He demands our faith. He wants our love. To me, there's a difference.
Except the point of raising Jesus from the dead and in the sight of the apostles and sending them out as witnesses to make disciples is so that they can bear witness to that, and they can persuade people to put their faith in him. So I think it's a valid objection that needs to be answered when people read the text and I've done it myself. I can understand where they're coming from. How is it that you want me to accept these values, that you want me to internalize and identify these values with you? when I don't see these being shown in the text and the events that happened. I do think that needs to be addressed. I think it can be addressed. I think a lot of what we discussed has addressed it. I don't, and again, I think that it might be true that what we're reading on the page isn't necessarily an accurate. I mean, it might be a hyperbolic treatment of what happened, but I don't think that works in every instance. I believe that the Israelites actually did kill men, women, and children, and I think they did it with God's approval. And I think it's emotionally jarring, but kind of as we've discussed, the purpose of this is for humanity, because of the curse of Eden, because of the corruption of the Watchers, because of their apostasy at Babel and being disinherited and given over to other gods who then turned corrupt. Humanity had fallen into such a state of savagery, and God wanted to save us. God wanted to redeem humanity. The fact that we have the moral sensibilities we do, that they didn't have 2,000 years ago, where nobody thought to object to this, is testament to the fact that it worked, that the ends did justify the means. But the fact is, it was necessary to do that, to take over the promised land, for there to be a chosen people, for the promises to Abraham, for him to be a blessing to all nations, and through him all peoples on earth would be blessed through the Messiah. That was necessary to bring that about. And if let's just say, for the sake of argument, that God told them, hey, explicitly, hey, only kill combatants, spare all the women, spare all the children. Only the people with a sword in their hand can you kill. Let's just say that happened. One, the people who were spared were still guilty of the same sins that the combatants were guilty of. God does get to judge sin. That is his prerogative, and that's a big point that we need to reckon with, that we forget. I mean, Christ on a cross is, that's familiar imagery to us, but we often forget. We often don't really wrap our hearts and minds around the fact that this is what he did to his own son to deal with sin. Like, God hates sin. God, it's very serious, but that's one thing that we could camp out on for a while. But the other thing is, let's just say they spared all of those women and children. Just as a matter of statistics, there's a certain percentage of them. Let's just say that the majority were grateful for their lives and decided to let it go and move on to their lives, either assimilate into Israel or move away or whatever. There's a certain percentage of those people who were spared who would have thought of nothing but vengeance. They would have they would have planned their whole lives to take revenge for what they saw happen to their families. And so they would have had to fight the same wars over and over again over the centuries, and they eventually would have lost. And we see the apostasy that they fell into with victory. If they hadn't driven out the people, if they hadn't eradicated those influences, then the outcome wouldn't have come about that had to come about for the redemption of humanity. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I keep trying to come at this simply. We've talked before about, words and their meanings, and there's nuance. The 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. We're all pretty clear on the concept that there's multiple words that mean
Thou shalt not murder,
and that in the actual word there is murder, right? So to me, this is really simple. Is what occurs in Canaan, as an example, was that murder, or was that just taking of a bunch of lives? Right.
Only if I can steal my own stuff, is it murder?
That's my point. If God ordained it, it can't be murder.
Right.
Right. So it was just taking of a life, which is his right. Again, I'm just back to playoffs. Why are we talking about playoffs? Like that's how I see it. To me, it's that. And you know, I know I always come across as like the oversimplistic one on the team here, but some of this stuff, you can sit and wrap your mind around it for you know, over and over and over. And you know, Brian, in all seriousness, like you've done a little bit of like a circle. Like you're like here, and then they're like, but back here, and then this.
Well,
And I'm not beating up on you. You're trying to like talk it through in completeness, and I get that. I appreciate that. But I guarantee there's some listeners like, wait a minute, Brian, was it right for him to do it, or was it not right for him to do it? Right. Like this and that. And Dre's still on his side where he's like, either I don't think it happened literally, or if it did, there was some subtext.
To me, it's just justified. There's a reason.
Right.
It wasn't just because God declared it. God declared it for a reason.
Sure.
Or for multiple reasons, or for many reasons.
And just to be clear, I have at no point said it was wrong for him to do it. All I said.
No, I get it. I get it.
But I want to make sure I'm clear here. You might get it, but I want to make sure the listener gets it. At no point did I say it was wrong for God to do it. All I said was, I understand where a modern objector is coming from. I share their sense. I think to kind of simplify my point is, like, I agree with you, Matt, intellectually, that it bottom line, it's God's prerogative.
That's a soundbite, by the way.
Right. It is God's prerogative.
No, I agree with you, Matt, intellectually. Like that's a soundbite.
Yeah, I could see that getting yeah. So I agree with you intellectually, but it isn't that easy emotionally, and that's not a failure of your objection. It's an indication that our moral sensibilities need correction.
Right.
I'm not saying, hey, you're right to feel that way. I get why you feel that way.
Sure. There's a difference with saying I understand versus you're right. Those are very different things.
Let me wrap up this one point, and then I'll probably pretty much be done with my whole take on this. But the fact that we have such a problem with this emotionally, it speaks to we don't grasp the seriousness of sin, and we don't understand the basis for our own morality. Like we've become self-righteous.
Well, I would twist, I agree with it. I would twist it subtly, and I would say we've lost sight of the supreme awesomeness and power that is God.
Absolutely, yes.
By thinking that our feelings and emotions are more important than his righteousness.
I think the book of Job is probably we could have done this whole podcast by just saying, yeah, read the book of Job.
So funny, full circle, fourth wall break. I almost wore a Disturbed t-shirt today for the show, because I kicked a song to Dre to check out, and it's a song by Disturbed called Prayer. And if anyone's listening that's a Disturbed fan, if you're a fan of that song, I did some deep reading on the lyrics, and it's actually about the book of Job.
Yeah.
That's the meaning of that song, and it's dope.
Which I hate to spoil it. If you haven't read Job yet,
you spoiled Job.
Yeah, it's only like a 3,000-year-old text.
Yeah.
So it's on you.
If you can't spoil a movie from the 90s, then I think
right. But the book of Job ends with there's all this philosophical wrangling about, is it right for God to do this, or is Job in the wrong, and all this stuff is happening. And Job never curses God. Job never rebels. He never agrees with the people telling him that, but he insists on his own righteousness, but he's still kind of like, God, why'd you do this? And he's answered eventually, not with an argument, not with an explanation, but with he encounters God, and in just basking in the awesomeness of God, he realizes, shut up, Job. I don't have an objection. There's nothing I can say to you. You're God, and I'm dust and ashes, and I'm just lucky to be here. Which is as with most questions in life, the answer is God's own person and the awesomeness of who he is.
So Dre, what were you going to say?
I just don't think that any atheist that brings up this question is doing it in good faith. I don't, not an atheist, maybe somebody who's seeking answers, but somebody who actually believes that there is no good and evil, that things are just, they just are, then, you know, where, and then,
I think
and then in the very next breath, bring up morality and
I
then
think
talk
people
about,
c- I
and
think
then talk
people can
about good
be
and evil, and then say, you know, things like, well, because science, right? Science makes it true, and science sends rockets to the moon, but religion flies planes into buildings, right? That's a famous line by Mr. Dawkins.
or
He
I think
doesn't
that's
believe
Sam
any of it.
Harris,
So
but
what's that?
I think that's Sam. It doesn't matter. Sorry. I
Yes. I think
I'm a
they probably
jerk.
both
Go
say
on.
it. But if you don't believe any of it and you're just trying to get you in a
In a
gotcha
gotcha
moment,
moment. Yep.
then F you.
I think that does accurately describe a lot of atheists. But I also I get that, like, people are so thoroughly emotionally conditioned to, like, and morality, it's something that we just kind of, it's like fish reflecting on being wet. They don't do it. It's just it's so much a part of their existence that they don't reflect upon it. Like, how often do you think about just the miracle, the supernatural, astonishing miracle of the existence of human consciousness?
More and more all of the time.
I don't think most people do.
I mean,
I think,
I,
You asked
I
Dre a question. You weren't
right,
asking me about
yes.
the average
Yeah.
person.
well, but it was a rhetoric. It was like you, the
All the
general
time.
you.
So that
I believe that you do that.
things are not lost on me these
I,
days.
I don't know that. Oh, yeah, because of the stroke.
That's one huge
Well,
reason.
the grandkids, all the
That
things,
it
like the
Right.
is.
whole circle of life.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I don't like. I remember explaining this to a coworker, and it's one of the highlights of my life. I was kind of asking her. I was kind of some questions to kind of like explain the fact that consciousness is a black box. The self is a black box. Asking her to, like, tell me about yourself, and every answer was something external. And just watching her eyes open, just this explosion of like she said, oh, you literally just blew my mind. Um, it's one of these miracles that we just kind of walk around with and don't really notice. Like, and I think morality is one of those things. We're just kind of all of our stories, all of our interactions, we're conditioned to kind of take morality as a given without really examining what it is. Um, so I think that, I think that argument itself is kind of the foundation to the discussion we've been having. Like, where does morality come from? And like, I agree with your objections, but I don't know that I accept that every atheist who makes that argument is necessarily
I didn't say.
acting in good
I mean, maybe I said
acting in
every
bad
atheist,
faith.
but I think the atheist viewpoint lends itself to my objection.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But like, when individual atheists do that, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt,
Of course, or
and
you
then
want to
up
give them a real answer, right?
up to. But then when they show they're acting in bad faith, then I nuke them.
Speaking of
So
Sam Harris, I'm reading a book right now written by his wife, Annika Harris, talking about consciousness and where it comes from and how do we prove it. And it's not bad. I'll share my findings and thoughts on it when I'm done.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we should do an episode
We should.
on consciousness.
Annika Harris.
By the way,
And I
I
like
love
her, by the way.
I love Sam Harris.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Sam Harris. Obviously I disagree with him, but I think that the way he's almost too smart for his own good. Like the way that he frames debates, it's like he's teeing it up for you to just beat him. To just he makes this great, shiny, hard, just hefty stick that he just hands you, and you can just beat him with it. It's great. Like, read The End of Faith if you haven't already.
I will.
Like, I love the terms he sets up of conversational intolerance. like when people sort of like, they'll make a claim about their beliefs or about the way the world works. And then you ask, you challenge them on it, and they'll be like, well, it's my faith. And early 2000s social custom dictated, you just kind of, oh, okay, well, that's, and he advised conversational intolerance. You push back on that. You like, well, no, why do you believe that? Why is that? Why does, your faith itself just doesn't justify that? I love that. I'm here. I'm all for those terms. And he has a long passage that I like to quote in its entirety. I think I might have read it on the podcast once when we talked about AI, or
Sounds familiar.
About the nature of consciousness, and that it is entirely faith-based, that the brain is the bearer of consciousness, and about how, like, a brain as a physical system, there's nothing about it that says it bears consciousness. We only know about that because we're conscious. And he talks about the Turing test, and that's kind of like it's a really great sort of backwards argument for God. But that's a tease for maybe
I do have some thoughts on consciousness, but that's for another time.
Yeah.
Since our AI, I actually looked into stuff, and I could have done that episode much better.
We can redo it. I mean,
sure.
That's, time moves on. It's been a year, right? We can always revisit topics.
So,
yeah,
we answered this atheist question.
I mean, we certainly gave you some things to go think about. Let us know, like, so when you ask us a question and we give you the answers, like, tell us how we did. I mean, you can say you guys didn't answer my question, or you did, but like, hey, you gave me some thoughts, things to think about. I'd never heard, I never thought of before. Yeah, or guys, I've already been through all that. That was like the most pedestrian answer I could have had. Like, I expected more out of you guys. Ellen, chat.
Why do I listen to you guys?
Like whatever. But let us know. Be interesting. We always want that. We want to keep that feedback going. So please let us know.
And keep asking us questions. Keep them coming. Also, if there are Bible passages that you got questions about that you don't quite understand, we might not either, but we'll do our best.
But you better believe we'll have a take.
We will. We always have a take. And I want to leave everybody, if anybody isn't a Disturbed fan and you really don't believe me that this song is about Job, the chorus, the hook of the song, basically through every verse, he's talking about all the bad things in his life, and darkness and all that kind of stuff, because that's it's metal, right? But he sets up the hook with let me enlighten you, this is the way I pray. Then he says, living just isn't hard enough, burn me alive inside, living my life's not hard enough, take everything away. It doesn't get more metal than that. It's a pretty cool song. Recommend everybody go listen to it.
Concur.
All right. I like Disturbed.
So you find us Mount Hermeneutics, and in all the places you get your podcasts, and it can help you out if you just go ahead and hit the notification bell or subscribe wherever it is that you are. And if you want to send us a question, the best place to do that is mountainhermeneutics@gmail.com.
Or the last question, I mentioned our website was coming up. It's not actually functional, but it has a placeholder. But the one thing it does have is a question box, and that's where we got this last question. So appreciate. I think it was Andrew. Is that who it was? Anyway, appreciate you going there and hitting that. I get those sent right to me whenever somebody pumps a question in. So we will get those. And
that website is mountainhermeneutics.com. .com.
Type shit.
Skibbity.
So, not doing it. Not gonna encourage this.
Okay, so with that, I will say, stay enlightened and stay curious, and we will see you next week. God bless.